Just last week, while politicians in Washington were still boasting about the success of their tech blockade, a new Huawei phone, the Mate 80, quietly appeared on the streets of Shenzhen. Third-party teardown reports quickly confirmed everyone's suspicions and fears. It was powered by a brand-new Kirin chip, manufactured by SMIC, with performance approaching the 5-nanometer class. At almost the exact same moment, the U.S. Treasury Department announced a new round of sanctions. This time, the target was no longer hardware, but an attempt to sever the financial lifeblood of American venture capital flowing into China's AI and quantum computing sectors. This sequence of events perfectly captures the absurd dynamic of our time. For every new layer of technological wall America builds, China seems to find a tunnel to quietly bypass it. This is no longer a simple war of containment. It has become a futile, global game of whack-a-mole. And today, when we see those cargo ships idling outside the port of Shanghai, when we see foreign chips stamped with the red seal of rejected, we must understand that we are not witnessing isolated business decisions. We are seeing the signal of a great power that, after a long period of enduring pressure and strategic positioning, is beginning to play its own hand. To understand this chess game, we must first abandon the naive idea of analyzing geopolitical strategy through the lens of traditional free market theory. What we are witnessing is not a random market fluctuation, but the unfolding of a meticulously designed state-level strategy that we can call strategic resilience and calibrated ambiguity. Let's first deconstruct the first part, strategic resilience. Since October 2022, Washington's sanctions hammer has fallen again and again, with the explicit goal of freezing China's progress in cutting-edge fields like AI and supercomputing. This is classic hegemonic logic. Paralyze the opponent's brain through precise chokeholds to maintain one's own generational tech advantage. However, this strategy is built on a fatal miscalculation. It underestimates the importance of the torso. China's response was not to engage in a costly, head-on collision with the U.S. in cutting-edge fields, but to first ensure the absolute security of the torso. Official data shows that in 2023, China's domestic chip production grew by 6.9% to 351.4 billion units. The vast majority of these were not advanced processors for AI or supercomputers, but mature node chips for automobiles, home appliances, and industrial equipment. This is the core of strategic resilience. Beijing understands that in a full-blown geopolitical confrontation, ensuring the independent operation of the nation's industrial base, transportation networks, and foundational defense is far more important than producing a few of the most powerful AI chips. More critically, the vast majority of military hardware, from precision-guided missiles and radar systems to battlefield communication devices, does not require bleeding-edge 3-nanometer chips. They rely on stable, reliable, mature node chips. By securing a massive domestic supply of these workhorse chips, Beijing is systematically insulating its entire defense industrial base from Western pressure. This is a form of bottom-line thinking, ensuring that no matter how hostile the external environment becomes, the nation's fundamentals remain solid. Now, let's look at the second and more perplexing part for the West, calibrated ambiguity. After establishing this baseline of resilience, China began to execute a series of dazzling and contradictory, ambiguous operations on top of it. On one hand, it publicly champions Made in China 2025 and pushes for indigenous R&D. On the other, it quietly lobbies Washington, hoping for a relaxation of specific restrictions on key AI chips like HBM. It's a posture of self-reliance on one side and open cooperation on the other. On one hand, chip import volumes plummet, seemingly decoupling from the world. On the other, just a few months later, customs data shows imports soaring by 10.4% year-over-year, as if re-embracing the world. This volatility is a hellish torment for Western suppliers. NVIDIA's revenue from China plummeted from 66% of its total sales to just 21%. TSMC and Samsung are forced to walk a tightrope between complying with Washington's directives and losing their largest customer. This is the power of the calibrated ambiguity strategy. It injects massive uncertainty into the global supply chain through unpredictable market behavior, forcing multinational corporations to factor China policy risk as a heavily weighted variable in their cost models. It keeps adversaries in a constant state of guessing and reacting, unable to form a stable, long-term strategy. Behind this strategy is a confrontation between two entirely different economic philosophies. Let's look at the SMIC paradox. In the second quarter of 2025, its profits plunged by nearly 20% due to export controls and overcapacity. According to the logic of Western capital markets, this is a company on the verge of failure. And yet, while its profits sank, its production capacity was expanding wildly, fueled by state subsidies. This is the key. A financialized empire, driven by Wall Street's quarterly reports and shareholder value, is confronting a productive empire whose highest objective is long-term national strategic interest. While one side obsesses over short-term financial metrics, the other is willing to endure any short-term pain in exchange for long-term strategic autonomy and ultimate victory. This game has also placed America's allies in an excruciating position. For South Korea's Samsung, Taiwan's TSMC, and even European and Japanese equipment and material suppliers, this is not just market volatility, it's a political nightmare. They are forced to comply with Washington's orders, severing ties with their largest customer, and their financial statements take a direct hit as a result. Washington is, in effect, exporting its own political anxiety and forcing the economies of its allies to bear the costs of its strategy. This behavior is not just selfish, it is a corrosion of the alliance system itself. The message it sends is that on Washington's chessboard, the economic prosperity of allies will always be secondary to America's own hegemonic maintenance. And the war has long since spread beyond hardware. American-dominated EDA-designed software remains one of China's most critical dependencies. This isn't just a supply chain issue, it's a form of intellectual control. Controlling EDA is like controlling the language and grammar of chip design. It means that even the most brilliant Chinese engineers must think and create using a vocabulary defined by America. Washington's goal is not just to stop the production of chips, but to colonize the very thought process of technological innovation itself, a deeper form of knowledge hegemony. Therefore, China's push for homegrown EDA is not just a technological breakout, but a liberation struggle for intellectual independence. In the more fundamental realm of raw materials, China holds the power of export controls over key minerals like gallium and germanium, one of the few choke points it can use to directly counter the West. This is no longer a single-front conflict. It is an all-out, three-dimensional war of attrition involving trade, capital, talent, software, and raw materials. Both sides are decoupling, yet both are deepening certain forms of entanglement. Ultimately, when we pull back and look at the big picture, the initially baffling 15.4% plunge in imports becomes clear. It was not an isolated statistic, nor a wound showing weakness. It was a carefully calibrated strategic feint, a door briefly shut only to be reopened. It was a declaration that in the global tech game, China has transformed from a passive rule taker into an active player capable of shaping and disrupting the entire board. The crack we have seen this year will not heal. It is being reinforced into a deep globe-spanning fault line of geopolitics and ideology. This is the inevitable endgame of a unipolar power choosing coercion over competition, containment over coexistence. And the aftershocks will not just reshape supply chains. They will reshape the very definition of global power in the 21st century. So when the dust settles, the board is reset. On one side, an incumbent empire using its existing financial and political power to demand absolute loyalty from its allies and enforce a policy of containment. On the other, a rising power using state-led systemic innovation to offer the world another choice. The middle ground is rapidly vanishing. So, what we are all left with is no longer a theoretical question. What is the West's next move? Is it time to admit that the containment strategy has failed and to commit to a true head-to-head competition of strength versus strength? Or is it to double down, risking the further alienation of allies and a more intense tech arms race, by continuing down this path of blockade with no end in sight? And for the rest of the world, is the rise of a new technological pole a threat, or is it a long-awaited opportunity for a more balanced global order? Leave your raw, unfiltered thoughts in the comments below. This is a conversation we all need to be a part of.